On a warm spring night in 1866, as a modest Indiana town slept beneath a moonlit sky, a string of railway cars rattled across the Midwest, carrying something precious: money, documents, and the promise of America's expanding frontier. What awaited that train in the darkness would not merely shape the fates of the men involved, it would ignite a new era in American crime. This is the story of the Reno Gang, the group credited with executing the first peacetime train robbery in United States history. It is a story of daring, chaos, greed, and the birth of an American myth. But it is also a story of small towns, fragile laws, angry citizens, and the creation of the vigilante tradition that soon came to define the frontier. Tonight, we return to that night, October 6, 1866. The night the train stopped, and history began. Part 1, The World Before the Robbery. The American Civil War had ended just a year earlier. The nation was still reeling, rebuilding itself not only physically but morally, psychologically, and economically. Soldiers returning home brought with them skills that didn't always fit cleanly into peacetime. Some found work. Some found trouble. And some, like the Reno brothers, found something in between. Jackson County, Indiana, was not the lawless frontier of dime novels or the dusty plains of cattlemen. It was farmland, gently rolling hills, and communities tied together by churches, mills, and railways. Industrialization had begun to reach even smaller towns, with trains becoming the arteries of the economy, pulsing with life and money. For criminals, trains were new opportunities, predictable schedules, valuable freight, minimal protection. But until 1866, no one had dared to rob a moving train in peacetime. Stagecoaches, yes. Banks, occasionally. But trains were thought to be too fast, too dangerous, too well guarded. But the Reno brothers, Frank, John, Simeon, and William, were not ordinary criminals. They had been accused of everything from arson to burglary, always managing to slip away before justice could catch up. Their reputations were whispered about in taverns and general stores. They were trouble, people said. But few realized they were about to change American crime forever. Part 2, The Renos. The Reno brothers grew up on a modest farm outside the town of Seymour. They were not born outlaws. In fact, they were described in their youth as hardworking but restless. What changed them is a matter of debate. Some say they were tempted by gambling. Others say they fell into the wrong crowds. And still others claim that, in the chaotic atmosphere after the Civil War, they simply chose the path that offered the most money with the least effort. Frank Reno was the eldest and the leader. Calculating, sharp-eyed, and ruthless when necessary, he had a talent for organization. John Reno, the most charismatic, handled planning and negotiation. He was the smooth talker, the one who could charm people, even while plotting against them. Simeon and William were muscle, intimidating, quick to violence, and fiercely loyal to their brothers. Together, they formed the nucleus of the Reno Gang, a group that grew to include a handful of local troublemakers and drifters. Their early heists were small-scale, store burglaries, horse theft, and counterfeit operations. But they were honing skills they would soon apply to something much bigger. By the fall of 1866, the Reno brothers had become bold. Too bold for some. And that boldness was about to culminate in a crime that would echo across decades. Part 3, The Target. The Ohio and Mississippi Railway was one of the major lines running through the Midwest. Its trains carried freight, passengers, and, crucially, money. On that particular October evening, a train was scheduled to pass through Seymour with a safe containing cash and negotiable bonds. For the Reno brothers, it was the perfect target, well-timed, lightly guarded, and within easy reach of their home base. And so, under a blanket of darkness, the Reno Gang made their move. Part 4, The Night of the Robbery. October 6, 1866. The night was unusually still. The stars hung low, and the only sounds were the distant chirps of insects and the murmur of leaves as a soft breeze drifted through southern Indiana. In the shadows near the railway, the Reno gang waited. The train approached, its headlamp slicing through the darkness like a knife. The roar of the engine filled the night, rhythmic and powerful. As it slowed for the Seymour depot, the gang sprang into action. They boarded quickly, quietly, using lantern light and the cover of steam to mask their movements. Once aboard, they moved through the cars with the confidence of men who had rehearsed every step. At the express car, they confronted the guard. Depending on which account you believe, he surrendered without a fight, or after a brief scuffle. Either way, the gang gained control swiftly. Inside the car was the safe. Heavy. Bolted down. And locked tight. They tried to open it, using the tools they had brought, hammers, wedges, perhaps even a small amount of black powder. But the Reno brothers were nothing if not prepared for contingencies. When the safe wouldn't yield, they took the next best thing. They removed the safe from the car and tossed it off the moving train into the darkness below. Then, just as quickly as they had boarded, the Reno gang jumped off the train and vanished into the woods outside town, leaving confusion and chaos behind them. Part 5, The Escape. Once on the ground, they regrouped at a predetermined hideout. Under moonlight, they cracked open the stolen safe. Accounts vary on how much was taken, some say around $10,000, others more. But whatever the amount, it was enough to be life-changing money for the era. The Reno brothers celebrated, but not loudly. They were experienced criminals, disciplined when necessary. For now, at least, they kept a low profile. Meanwhile, the Ohio and Mississippi Railway was reeling. Word spread quickly, a train had been robbed, while moving. This had never happened before in peacetime America. Newspapers caught fire with the story. Editorials were printed, some condemning the crime as a sign of society's moral collapse after the war, others romanticizing the boldness of the act. The public was captivated. And other criminals were inspired. The Reno gang had unintentionally lit a fuse. Part 6, The Manhunt begins. Law enforcement descended on Jackson County almost immediately. Detectives from the Pinkerton National Detective Agency soon arrived, marking one of the earliest collaborations between private detectives and local law enforcement in the Midwest. The Pinkertons were relentless. They interviewed, interrogated, and investigated every known associate of the Reno brothers. Still, the gang had an advantage: local fear. People were scared to speak against the Renos. Some were sympathizers. Others were intimidated. The walls of silence in Seymour were thick. But the Renos made a mistake. They kept stealing. Robberies continued: stores, county treasuries, post offices, and over time, additional trains. Each crime brought more public anger, and more Pinkerton attention. Eventually, pieces of evidence began to accumulate. Witnesses, under pressure, started naming names. Informants were bribed. And slowly, a case was built. Pinkerton agents were hired in greater numbers. Policies, technology, and law enforcement tactics all changed because of that first robbery. But the Reno brothers remain a complicated symbol. To some, they were ruthless criminals. To others, misunderstood men shaped by a brutal era. To historians, they are pioneers of a new kind of American outlawry.